So look, we are 4 days into 2023, not very far along at all, right? And we know what the dominant domestic political story is. It's the story of the grotesque failure of the Republican congressional majority to appoint a new speaker. And this channel's followed it at length and will continue to do so as long as it's a major political story. And also because it's fun to see the GOP constantly step on rakes and humiliate themselves. But I did see something on Twitter about a completely separate issue, completely separate news story, also considerably lower in its profile, that offered kind of a nice contrast to what the GOP is currently experiencing. And that contrast is this. When you consider the legislative successes that the Democratic Party has enjoyed under President Biden's leadership in the past 2 years, right, 2021 and 2022, it's been truly remarkable, especially when you consider the fact that many of those legislative successes not only were with razor-thin majorities, you know, a 10-seat majority in the House under Nancy Pelosi, and I mean a technical, right, a clerical majority in the Senate, right? You have 48 Democrats, 2 independents who caucus with them, and then Vice President Harris who breaks the tie. And despite that, Biden has been able to milk that for all it's worth. But very often, many of those successes were bipartisan, right? Which I think surprised many of us. I know it surprised me, especially someone who's very cynical, right? I thought that Biden during the primary season and early on in his presidency was tilting at windmills, right? That he was just completely out of touch if he thought that he was going to get any good faith bipartisanship from the Republican Party. But every now and then, somehow, the man pulled it off, right? And there was actually a bit of a reminder of that today when President Biden and Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the Senate minority leader, went to Covington, Kentucky, near Cincinnati, Ohio, to show off their bipartisan bona fides, okay? And basically, it's about the bipartisan infrastructure law that Biden passed in November 2021. That was a major legislative accomplishment, right? $1.2 trillion, if I remember correctly. It was a bipartisan law. And actually, what's interesting about that, the first thing that's interesting about that is the fact that the Trump administration promised for 4 years, right? Trump actually campaigned on this before he was elected president, that he would pass a major infrastructure package during his presidency. And he failed for 4 years, even when Republicans controlled both chambers of Congress. He still failed. You know, the art of the deal kind of let him down then, right? Seems like he should probably read that book. He's hardly the deal maker he pretends he is. But Biden, it didn't even take Biden 4 years. It took Biden less than a year to pull it off, right? He was inaugurated in January 2021, and the bill was signed into law November of that year. That's a hell of an accomplishment and testament to Biden's leadership, his diplomatic skills, and also the rigor and cohesion of the Democratic Party, which is very often, again, as we've discussed and as you know, it's very often fractured and schismatic, right? But here lately, for the most part, with some exceptions, Democrats have had their crap together, and they've been a unified front. And so this visit by Biden and McConnell to Kentucky to tout funds that were allocated from the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill to a bridge, the Brent Spence Bridge, that connect Cincinnati to Kentucky, which was in a horrible state of disrepair. It was a rusted relic, and funds from that bipartisan infrastructure law are going towards repairing that bridge, which is also actually a campaign promise specifically of Biden's. When he did a Cincinnati town hall, he said that he was going to fix that damn bridge, I think was the exact quote. We're going to fix that damn bridge of yours going into Kentucky, Biden said during a town hall in Cincinnati in the summer of 2021, so before the bill was passed into law. And what was also interesting was the fact that that McConnell actually touted the bipartisan success there, right? So, McConnell, who was known during the Obama administration as the Grim Reaper of legislation, and that was a reputation that was well-earned. He went out of his way. I mean, he said his number one priority during President Obama's first term was to deny President Obama a second term. He was not a good faith operator. He had no intention of passing laws that would in any way be reflective of a Democratic victory, right? So he would just rather bring the whole thing to a grinding halt, knowing that the sitting president would be blamed, the sitting president, of course, being Obama. It was a very cynical political calculus, and it failed ultimately because, of course, Obama was reelected to a second term. But McConnell's Grim Reaper instincts, I mean, they're still there, right? It's not like he's working bipartisanly on every issue. As a matter of fact, in 2021, when the debt ceiling issue, right, because the debt ceiling has to be raised constantly, and under President Biden, the Democratic Senate majority had to raise the debt ceiling so that the United States would not default on its loans. And by the way, it was to accommodate spending that was conducted under the Trump administration, right? It was basically to raise the debt ceiling so the U.S. wouldn't default on payments for checks that Trump signed, right? It wasn't Biden. It wasn't, Biden spending. It was spending under the Trump administration. And yet, Mitch McConnell was content to play chicken with Democrats and try to force them to raise the debt ceiling using a reconciliation package, right? It was again, just a very cruel, cynical political calculus. So I don't want you to misunderstand me. Mitch McConnell is still not a good faith operator. It's just that he is more likely to be good faith with Joe Biden than he was under Barack Obama, and probably would be under most presidents. But I do want to play a little clip of what he said at this event with Biden in Cincinnati.
We all know these are really partisan times, but I always feel no matter who gets elected, once it's all over, we ought to look for things we can agree on and try to do those, even while we have big differences on other things. And this bridge, I think, symbolizes the coming together of both sides on something that both sides thought was important to try to get an outcome. You have a Democratic governor here, Governor Beshear, a Republican legislature led by Senate President Stivers, Kentucky, House led by Speaker David Osborne, Chris McDaniel from Northern Kentucky, who took the lead on it down in Frankfort to provide the matching funds that we needed to make this project go forward. So it's not just this project, but the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill that the president signed, provides dramatic additional assistance. Just looking at the Kentucky side of the river, this project plus other projects, over $8 billion over the next 5 years.
So it's really good that Biden is getting the proper credit that he's owed for this, especially from somebody, again, as cynical as Mitch McConnell. And again, I don't think that you should take McConnell's platitudes at face value, right? I mean, he's like most hyper-partisan actors and most bad faith actors, he will constantly appeal to bipartisanship and to good faith when he very rarely follows through with that. But again, it's an interesting contrast. We are seeing the fruits of President Biden's leadership, of Democratic cohesion, and Biden's ability to net some very surprising bipartisan wins in 2021 and 2022. Now, of course, that is likely to go away once the House GOP gets its crap together, because, of course, they have no interest in working bipartisanly with the president. But even if that doesn't happen, even if we don't see the sort of legislative successes from Democrats in 2023 that we saw the last 2 years, which again is likely, at least we can look back and say we did get stuff done. Democrats did get stuff done. Democrats did deliver, and that's something to be proud of.